Number 1. Earlier this year, when our exams had finished, my friends and I decided to go clubbing to blow off some steam and celebrate. The club we decided to go to is one with 3 floors, with each floor playing a different style of music. So, as usual, as soon as we were inside, we decided to split up. As it was the post-exam season, the club was packed to capacity, so even though a few of us headed to each floor, we soon got separated. I'm not sure how long I had been dancing, but eventually it was so hot I felt as though I was going to pass out, so I began elbowing my way through the dancing swarm towards the air-conditioned seating area near the back of the second floor, which, in case you were wondering, is the nothing but hits floor. Obviously, no actual seats were free, so I just stood in the alcove and tried to cool down. One of my friends, Noor, is Muslim, and so for religious reasons she doesn't drink, and she definitely does not hook up with people. She literally just goes to clubs in order to spend time with friends and dance. That night she had joked that we were the teetotal twins, as I was banned from drinking due to just finishing up a course of antibiotics. I'm a medic, so I know not to cheat. I'm not exactly a fan of contributing to the rise of superbugs. So, you can see why it would have caught my attention when I thought I saw her being piggybacked by a tall guy with messy, light-colored hair who was built like a rugby player. I called out her name, but obviously I could have been screaming directly in her ear and she wouldn't have heard me in that club. I ran after them and grabbed the guy's t-shirt, yanking him to a halt. He turned around, and as he did so, I saw Noor's head flop back. She was completely out of it. "Is she alright?" I yelled, pointing at her. The guy laughed and nodded. Yeah, she just had a few too many drinks and passed out. I can't quite describe the feeling that hit me at that instant. The closest I can get is that jarring jolt of panic that rips through you when you wake up in the morning, check your clock, and realize you slept through your alarm. Noor didn't drink, and she doesn't drink. Does she need some water or something? Nah, it's cool. I'll just take her back to my place and let her sleep it off there. I really think she needs some water first. At this, the guy took a step away from me and said she was a total lightweight and how this happened all the time. It's alright. She's my girlfriend. I just stared at him for a second and wondered what the hell to do. I knew I couldn't fight the guy as he was about 3 times my size. I sure as hell wasn't going to let him take my friend anywhere, but in the time it would take to explain what was going on and ask for help from a stranger, he'd be gone and he'd probably have taken Noor with him. So I tried to stall for time. "Listen, man, I'm a medic and she looks seriously dehydrated. Why don't you sit down with her for a second and I'll go get her a glass of water?" "I only live around the corner, it's cool," he said. "Let me just try and wake her up before you leave, okay?" He hesitated for a second, but finally nodded, and together we managed to persuade someone to move so he could set Noor down. "Wait here, okay?" And then he just nodded. I set off as though towards the bar, but as soon as I was obscured by the crowd, I made a beeline for the entrance to the second floor where I knew there was always a bouncer on guard. I tried not to sound completely hysterical as I yelled over the music to him that my friend had been drugged and some guy was trying to kidnap her. He told me to calm down and looked at me as though I was completely insane. Screaming, "I'm sober," at someone is probably one of the least convincing ways to convince anyone that that's true, but by this point I was in a panic as I realized I shouldn't have left Noor alone with that guy. "Please, just come with me," I told him. Something must have gotten through to him as he decided that he'd follow me to check it out. When we got there, Noor was slumped forward exactly where I'd left her, completely unconscious. But the guy was nowhere to be seen. I gave the bouncer the best description I could manage, but in the lighting I hadn't been able to make out more than he had light hair, was about 6 feet tall, hench, and was wearing a dark short-sleeved shirt. He could have been anybody, and he's still out there. The next day, Noor woke up with a splitting headache and only fuzzy recollections of even having gone out that night before. She had no idea what had happened, no idea who the guy had been, and no idea how to thank me for saving her. If you see a girl who looks completely out of it, or utterly shit-faced being carried out of a club or leaving a club with a guy, I don't care how silly or cock-blocky you feel. Please, please just take a second to make sure she's okay. I dread to think of what might have happened to Noor if I hadn't. Number 2. When I was young, around 10 or so, I was walking home from my bus stop. I lived in this small subdivision with not that many people in my general area and with an overprotective mother who I am amazingly thankful to have. She always had a password that we used when someone was supposed to pick me up, so I never ended up with someone dangerous. I lived on the same block as my bus stop, so as soon as I got off the bus I could see my house. Thank the powers that be, because that's exactly what saved my life. So here I am, a little 10-year-old walking home from a crap day at school when this red pickup truck pulls up next to me. I'm on the side of the road since there aren't any sidewalks and I'm a good few feet away from the driver's side door. Inside, there's this man, looked to be in his early 20s I would say, and he gets my attention. "Your mom told me to come pick you up. She's late at work." Red flag right away because I can see my mom's van in our driveway and she doesn't even work. She's a stay-at-home mom, or, well, she did work, but she had her own company and she worked nights and she was a DJ. "What's the password?" I asked, and getting a pause from him as he thought he did his best to give an answer I would find acceptable. "She, forgot to tell me." "But she's home. I see her van in the driveway." Without another word, he drove off quickly and I never saw the red pickup in my area again. Honestly, I'm thankful that he didn't just lean out the window or jump out the door after me, since, looking back, I wasn't anywhere near far enough from the truck to feel safe. Number 3. This happened to me back in 2007. I was 9 years old and my brother was 14. My mom had sent us out of the house with about $30 to go to a movie and maybe get a bite to eat afterwards. After watching the movie, it was getting pretty dark and I was ready to go home. But my brother wanted to get something to eat first, and we agreed to walk to McDonald's, which was only a couple blocks from the movie theater. On our way there, we were stopped and approached by a man. He had a friendly smile plastered on his face and he was holding his child's hand. There didn't seem to be anything off about this guy. He was average looking and seemed to be nothing more than a father having a day out with his son. "Hey, do you two think you could give my son and I a hand real quick?" he asked. "We need help loading a mattress onto the back of our truck. The truck is just up the road." "Sorry, but we don't really have any time," my brother said. It was at this time I noticed the little boy. He was about 8 years old and he looked abnormally thin. He had a blank expression on his face and wore clothes that were much too big for him. I turned my attention back to the man, who was now mumbling to my brother about how it would only take a second. My brother kindly declined again. Being the helpful kid that I was, I joined in with the man and tried to persuade my brother that we should probably help them out. I turned to my brother, who was now staring down at the little boy. My brother had a disturbed expression on his face as he looked down at the child. The child just stared back at my brother, blankly. I didn't understand why my brother had that look on his face. He grabbed my hand and said, "I think that's my mom over there." He pulled me and we began walking away from the man. I didn't understand what was going on and why my brother had just lied about our mom being there. He didn't let go of my hand and practically dragged me until we were far enough distance away from the man and his son. I looked back and could still see the man holding his son's hand, only now he wasn't smiling anymore. He had a look of fury on his face and he yanked the little boy by his arm and they walked away. I pulled away from my brother and bombarded him with questions. He just shushed me and pulled his cell phone out of his pocket. He dialed in a number and began pacing around nervously while talking on the phone. I remember the police showing up and my mom came soon after. She took me home, but my brother was left with the police. I asked my mother what was going on and she said that the police were just questioning my brother because the man we had encountered was dangerous. That's all she told me, and I just went to bed. By the next morning, I had completely forgotten about the incident and things went back to normal. It wasn't until a few days ago that these memories flooded back into my mind. I decided to call my now 22-year-old brother to get some answers. When I brought the ordeal back up to him, he finally gave me the information I wanted to know, and now that I know everything, I understand how fucking terrifying our encounter with the man truly was. My brother told me that while the man was constantly trying to convince us to come with him, he happened to look at the little boy. The little boy then looked at my brother with his eyes filled with terror and mouthed the words, "I'm not his son. Please help me." Then his expression went back to being completely blank, almost as if he had never said anything at all. Visualizing it now fucking haunts me. This was why he had become so freaked out and snatched me away. When he called the police, they hurried down and he described the man the best he could. They couldn't do much with the little information my brother had given because we hadn't even seen the car that the man supposedly had. My brother told me that a few weeks into the investigation, they had found the little boy who was with the man, dead. His body had been cruelly dumped in the woods. The cause of death was malnutrition and dehydration. If my brother and I had gone with this sicko, we likely would have met the same fate. He obviously couldn't have kidnapped both of us on his own, as my brother was a fairly strong guy. That meant he had to have had other pedophile partners who would help him snatch up unsuspecting kids. Unfortunately, they were never able to catch any of the sick fucks who did this to the child, but the man was definitely not his father, that's for sure. His real parents had been already searching for their missing son for almost a month. The pedophile, or pedophiles, had managed to kidnap the poor kid and used him as their puppet to try to kidnap other children. Every time I think about the boy, I feel a deep pity for him. He was only a year younger than I was at the time, and I can only imagine how terrible it must be slowly starving to death. Number 4. This happened to me about a year ago. I was 19 years old and I was living in Florida for about a year with my grandparents. I was working and saving up for a car. I'm not really a day person and I like to do all my errands at night. I grew up in New York City, so I'm used to all the weirdos. I walked from my grandparents' complex to Chase Bank at around 7:30 p.m. because it was a 3-minute walk surrounded by fast food restaurants, a 7-Eleven, Publix, and a gas station, so that area is usually lit up by the surrounding lights. As I am walking, I see a man in an old 1990s green Camry. He was a skinny African-American man, probably in his mid-30s, in a white hoodie and a black beanie, which strikes me as odd because it wasn't even cold enough to wear a beanie. Inside, I see an African-American woman at the ATM machine, so I assume they must be together. She seems frustrated at the machine and says, "Hey sweetie, something is wrong with this damn machine. The card isn't working." I am standing a few feet away from her at the corner by the door to the entrance of the bank. I don't want to be hovering over people while they're doing their transactions after all. She is wearing a white hoodie as well, with a black beanie and pink leggings with snow boots. I find it weird because, like I said, it's not even cold. I step closer and she is handing me her card to try it. I look at her card and not only does it still have the sticker across it that you have to take it off to activate it, but it has a logo of Bank of America and we were at a Chase Bank. I get a weird vibe and look through the corner of my eye and see that her companion was now out of the car, but it was still running with the headlights on. I kept my hands clutched on my purse and said, "Why don't you take the sticker off?" She then looked me dead in the eye and in the nastiest voice she said, "No, that's not it. Why don't we try your card?" After that I stepped back to reach in my purse and pulled out my Swiss Army knife. She sees it and walks calmly out of the bank. She gets in the driver's side of the car and the male sits in the back seat and they drive off. I get nervous thinking what they were probably going to do to me, like rob me, and after a few minutes I complete my transaction and proceed to leave the bank. As I walk out of the bank, I see the couple in the Publix parking lot a good distance away. They were sitting in the front seat and seemed to be watching me. That's when I get freaked out. My brain starts buzzing. What if they follow me home and kill me or my grandparents? I proceed to call my grandpa to pick me up, and as I am on the phone, the couple drives by me with the woman still driving. They both look straight ahead and don't seem to look my way, but nonetheless I get freaked out. I walk the opposite direction to McDonald's. As I go inside, I see them drive past me further into the Publix parking lot. I wait in line to order my food since my grandpa was going to take a while because at his age, 68, he moves sort of slow. I order my food, get it, and sit down, which takes about 15 minutes to do. As I am eating, I look out the window and sure enough, I see the damn green Camry. This time the woman is driving, but I don't see the man anymore. She drives through the drive-thru and looks into the McDonald's I am in, but I'm not too sure if she saw me because her face was just emotionless. At this point I am freaking out, but don't want to text my grandpa to hurry up because I don't want him to freak out. Literally 2 minutes after, my grandpa shows up. He was pretty pissed that I had all morning to go to the bank and decided to go at night. Of all things, right? As he is driving out of the plaza, he stops at the stop sign and is signaling to the right to exit. And just like a damn horror movie, the Camry pulls up behind him with the man driving and the woman nowhere to be found. My grandpa drives off and I look behind me and see the woman run from inside the McDonald's into the car and they sped up behind us. I tell my grandpa exactly what's going on because at this point I am shitting bricks thinking, what the fuck is even going on? My grandpa decides to drive around a bit and not go directly home, which, looking back on it, was extremely smart of him to do. After a while, we stop at a fire station and pull inside. The green Camry drives off and we wait a while and call the police. Of course, nothing can be done because, well, they didn't do anything, but it was still freaky. I never saw the green car again, nor did I ever see the couple, but a lot of questions are left unanswered, which still bothers me. I avoided that plaza for a while until I got my first car, but man, that incident freaked me out so much. Number 5. It was early morning, around 7 a.m., and my fiance had already left for work. After spending the morning feeding and lounging with the baby in our bedroom, he fell asleep in my arms, so I moved him into his bassinet located right next to the queen-size bed. We live in a one-story home, so all of our rooms are ground floor. There are 2 large windows in our bedroom. They are narrow but stretch from floor to ceiling and let in a lot of beautiful natural lighting. After laying the baby down, I went into the kitchen to do some dishes. As I left the bedroom, I noticed that my cat was laying on the bed near the bassinet. When the baby first came, I never left the cat unsupervised with him. My cat is a very small cat, female, and very quiet. However, I know that sometimes pets can act up when a new baby is born. Our son was now about 2 months old and the kitty has been mostly disinterested in the babies, so I was no longer worried. I grabbed the baby monitor just to be safe, but felt pretty secure letting the cat sleep in the same room as the baby. I had been in the kitchen doing dishes for about 10 minutes when I heard the baby fussing a bit on the monitor. He whimpered a few times and I kept an ear out to see if he'd been fully woken up or if he was just falling in and out of sleep. Suddenly, I hear the cat through the monitor hissing and growling loudly. It was a deep, throaty growl that I had never heard from her before. At the exact same time, the baby started wailing. The only time I had ever heard him cry like that before was when he got his shots. It was a cry of real fear. I realized my worst fears were happening. I believed in having pets for life, and so when I found out we were having a baby, I went to great lengths to prep the kitty. I wanted to make sure the transition was good for her. I was super worried she wouldn't transition well despite her easygoing personality, and now here we were. My cat was attacking the baby and it was my fault for leaving him alone. At the first sound of the hissing and my baby's wailing, I dropped everything and with the soap still on my hands, sprinted the 2 rooms over back to my bedroom. I walked into a scene that I didn't expect at all. The baby was kicking around in the crib, red-faced and crying, and the cat was sitting at the foot of his bassinet facing away from the baby. She was facing the window across the room, puffed up and still growling. She wasn't attacking the baby, she was positioned to defend him. I looked to the window, but saw nothing. The thick drapes were still drawn, with a small open space between the fabric where the two drapes met in the middle. I pulled them back and saw nothing out front. The cat had now stopped hissing, but was still quietly growling in a hunched-up position. I picked up the baby to comfort him and pet the kitty until she calmed down. I didn't know what to think, but I was really on edge. Why had my cat freaked out? It was so out of character for her to react to random sounds or noises. I have never seen her so afraid. I remained unsettled for a few hours, but I eventually forgot about it. A few days later, this time in the evening, I sat with the baby in the living room, between the bedroom and the kitchen, reading a book. My fiancé was home and just going to bed for the evening. It was about 9 p.m. He gets up at around 5 a.m. for work, so he doesn't stay up very late. He was in our bedroom with the door closed, and I sat in the living room on the sofa. Our sofa is directly in front of a large bay window. It's very wide and goes floor to ceiling. The drapes are still open and it's not quite dark outside yet. The sun is just starting to set. At some point, I sat the baby down on a mat in the middle of the living room floor and went to the kitchen to get something to eat. While preparing some rice, I started to get a prickly feeling on my neck. I felt as if someone was watching me, and for some reason I felt really reluctant to look out of the kitchen windows, which were also open at the time. I quickly finished making my food and decided to take it into the living room to eat. I didn't want to spend any more time in the kitchen. I walked back into the living room, bowl in hand. The doorway faces the large windows, and so I was facing the giant windows as I walked in. That's when I saw her. There was a woman. She looked to be in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, and she was staring, nose pressed up against the wall, looking directly at my baby. She didn't seem to notice I had walked into the room. She just intently stared at the baby. She looked angry. I felt terrified. I grabbed the baby and yelled for my fiancé. The lady in the window then took off running a full sprint. My fiancé came out in his boxers and was still half asleep. I told him about the woman and then about the previous day when the cat defended the baby. I became convinced that she had been watching the baby that day as well. This last incident happened fairly recently and I haven't noticed anything since, but I'm afraid that she's not done yet. I honestly think she wants my baby. I can't explain why I think that, but I am convinced that she wants to kidnap him.